Let's take a little bit of walk of life, and I'll talk to you as I walk around. My name is Brian Turnbull. I'm fortunate and privileged to be the mayor in town. It's really the mayor, you know, I don't dress like this, but I'm dressed this way because we're really a Victorian village. We grew, the Victorian village means the Victorian era when Queen Victoria was on the throne, you know, from about 1832 to 1902, and that's when we grew. We have more Victorians on the National Registry than any other city in the state of Michigan. So I'm kind of dressed in that Victorian garb, and we just celebrated 2 weeks ago our Victorian festival here too. So I'll tell you a little bit in between the 5 or 6 stops, but if you have any questions at the end, you can ask them. I'm kind of a historian in town too. My grandparents were the historians back in the early part of the 1900s. My dad was a great storyteller, and some of his stories were true, I say. And now I'm kind of a historian of town too. So if you would follow me, we will walk up this way. So this area of town has always been historic. On your right side, this has always been School Square. So the schools have always had schools here since the mid-1800s. You know, there was an old schoolhouse, there's a Civil War high school house. So this whole section, this square, and then we have a community center and the library, but this has been owned by the school district. We were one of the biggest feeders for University of Michigan. Oh, somebody says I have to talk louder. Can you hear me okay back there? I'll try to be louder. Okay, good. If you can't hear me, give me the up sign. Usually I'm pretty loud. I'm trying to be calm today. So there's a lot going on in Northville. But back in the day, we were one of the biggest feeders to University of Michigan at the time, and it's in different books, even though little old Northville. Little old Northville is here because we're on 4 rivers, and the first milling area in the state was right here in the Northville area starting in the 1820s. We were a community 10 years before Michigan was a state, when we were just a territory in these parts. So we're here because we had the Upper and Middle Rouge that came down, and the Randolph Drain and the Johnson Creek. 4 counties worth of water come through Northville, Michigan. So that's really why we're here. And the nomenclature, Northville, Plymouth and Northville were settling in at the same time in the 1820s. Normally a municipality, more information I used to know, but I know now, is 6 by 6 square miles. That is a municipality. That's usually a town or a township. The 6 by 6 square miles is Northville, Plymouth Township, and Northville Township. We're only a couple square miles. We were the North Village in that 36 square miles, so thus Northville. There's old families like Dunlap and Katy and others. They were trying to figure out, do we call it Dunlapville or Katyville? It was a big meeting in town, and seeing we were the North Village, it became Northville. And 1827 is when that, okay, she tells me I got to get going. So, okay, we'll get going here. And you can ask me questions at the end, any questions. Today, we're going to be going to like 6 different stops, and actors will be telling you about different things. And Wendy Much, the archivist from the Millrace Village, will keep me going on task. Is that correct? It's almost impossible. And in here, you're going to see most of the streets in Northville. The originators, the original families, they're from here. You know, they were buried here. So all the streets in Northville, pretty much every name is in here, and you're going to hear quite a bit of that history too. And that's good looking 1964 Jag E-Type for the mayor too. Okay, let's let it go. So from there, we are right in the midst of renovation. We are having our bicentennial coming up in 1827. And if you look at these first stones and this crypt, we're just starting to redo every stone in this cemetery. This is one of the oldest cemeteries in the state of Michigan. We have Revolutionary War veterans. We have Civil War. Think about it. Revolutionary War veterans from 1776 that fought in that war in this cemetery. A lot of Northville citizens came from New York and New Jersey and came from the east and did land grants here in the North and Detroit area. I'm being told I better get going. So as you come in, every stone will be redone like these. Some months ago, these were all blackened, some were broken over, some were in pieces. That crib where 2 little Lapham children were was in pieces on the ground. We reconstructed. You can see where a stone was in many pieces. It's put together. Every stone in this cemetery will be reconstructed. We're doing this for our bicentennial. We'll have tours like this and we'll have trolleys going around. This will be one of the stops, and there'll be self-guided tours in and out of here. We're looking to have this bricked in and wrought iron fencing and gates as you come in. So it's kind of respectful. We're all on the shoulders of those that have come before us, and a lot of the families that are in here, it's pretty important. So the first one we're going to talk to, Mrs. Ambler is going to tell you all about the Ambler. We think we've been around about 5 generations. The Amblers are friends of mine today. They've been around 7 or 8 generations. They did an awful lot for Northville. And Mrs. Ambler is going to tell you all about that. So if you would kind of circle up around Mrs. Ambler, she will tell you about the history of the Ambler family.
Hello everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to the tour today. My name is Ursula Randall Ambler, and I married my husband William in Sodus, New York in 1826. Later we relocated to Detroit in 1837, and then finally to here in Northville in 1854. We were abolitionists, so we provided respite and safety to those traveling along the Underground Railroad, first at our house in Detroit, and then here at our hotel, the Ambler House Hotel. My husband built the Ambler House Hotel in 1854, and it was significant for many reasons, one of which was that it was the first balloon frame structure built in the area. Balloon frame structures were noted to be significantly lighter than their timber counterparts, and that they were advertised to be so light that they would float away like balloons. Well, our hotel did not float away. In fact, it remained a popular destination for many years under different proprietorships and different names. Before it burnt down in 1929, it was the oldest historic building in the village of Northville. Between the 1850s and 1860s, there was a stagecoach line that ran between Howell and Detroit, and lucky for us, it had a stop right at Main and Center, the very location of our inn. That not only provided us many a weary traveler to take care of, but also all the fresh gossip coming in from Detroit. My husband and I are actually, speaking of houses, that blue house right behind you is my family home. My husband built it for us in 1858, and it was for me and our 7 children, including John, who owned the sawmill here in Northville. Sadly, William passed away in 1863. As a widower, I later remarried about 8 years later to a Mr. Morris Decay, and he passed away in 1876. I lived to the ripe old age of 84, passing away in 1890. There are so many Ambler relatives living in Northville today, and you might even hear a story or two about me, the fabulous and popular proprietress of the Ambler House Hotel, who worked tirelessly to ensure that our guests felt welcome, comfortable, and well-fed. And the Northville Record even said our success was due to my untiring efforts to the welfare of all of our guests. And that is a legacy that I can be very proud of. I hope you enjoy the rest of the tour and say hello to some of my neighbors as you stop by.
As Mrs. Ambler said, a lot was going on. Stagecoaches came to Northville. That was a stagecoach stop. There was a stop on the Underground Railroad. In Northville, we had trains coming in and trolleys and stages. Northville was as big downtown in the mid-1800s as it is today. We were number 2 in economics in the state of Michigan, the city of Northville. Number 1 was Detroit, number 2 was Northville. Why is that? Because we were on all these rivers. The river power, moving all the wheels, you know, the mill race is a big pipe going from here down to there, pushing that water, pushing those wheels around. Before electricity, you had to be around water or have a steam engine someplace, but that's why Northville is where it's at, again, by all the water. If you look at some of these stones, one is Kellogg, one is Simmons, you know, one is Sessions. These Simmons Orchard, over in Novi, everything in this area was Northville. Envisioned from here to South Lyon to Novi to Livonia, pretty much Northville. Even today, our downtown serves as a downtown for Novi and Livonia and all the other suburbs in this area. We're the downtown for about 300,000 people. And it was that way pretty much in the mid-1800s. We had some of the biggest gatherings in the state of Michigan. Well, we had the biggest gathering on our centennial in 1927, tens of thousands of people here. A guy called Henry Ford used to come here with his group called the Vagabonds. That would be Thomas Edison and Burroughs and Firestone. They used to come to Northville. I know I'm coming. Henry Ford was married here, had his honeymoon here in the 1880s. He donated the land where Ford Field is, where our historic area is too. So I know I'm told I better get going here. So at the end, as we walk out, if you have questions, feel free. I grew up with the stories from my grandparents and my father, so I have a little bit of knowledge. Most of it's true in here too. So the next person, as you can see, some of these stones, we're going to rebuild every one of these stones. Some is in the ground, some are in pieces. I'm pretty much supportive of everything we can do for this cemetery to kind of see where our history was. The next person, Mr. Palmer, will tell you about the history of the Palmer family, and you might even know an old house in the area that still stands today. Mr. Palmer.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming out today to visit me and my family and my friends here. If you want to scooch over here, that sun in the eyes is terrible. So, when I was 20 years old, I moved to Michigan and I bought 160 acres on the corner of Beck and 9 Mile. Probably are familiar with that area. We built a home, my wife and I built a home in 1838, 8 years after we purchased the property. It's called the Lincoln House. It's still there today. It's the first house east of Beck, about 100, 200 yards east of Beck on the south side of the road. It's not on the historical registry because they made some renovations in the 1950s on the interior. The exterior looks pretty much like Abraham Lincoln's house in Springfield, Illinois. So that's why, hence is the name. My wife and I, wife Rebecca, we had 9 children. We were actually one of the first settlers in Novi. Moved in and bought the farm, the acreage, 5 years later in 1830. We were very religious. We took our 9 children to the Baptist church here on Wing Street and Randolph. That building was built in 1841. In fact, I used to live right across the street from it, so I thought that was pretty interesting. So we married many couples at our home on 9 Mile Road. The road, 9 Mile, looks much different, as many roads do around here. Back then it was, it was a dirt road, not like the dirt roads of today. It was more like mud if it rained, and we didn't have the, the extended Grand Wagoneer to take our 9 kids to church every Sunday. We had the horse and buggies, and it was quite a trip because the ruts got pretty deep back then. Well, after 30 years of farming, we sold our land after our son, I got so many kids I don't want to misrepresent any of my kids, but following the death of our son Daniel in the Civil War. So when Daniel enlisted in 1862 at the age of 26, he was a prisoner of war for a year and died in prison, southern prison, after 1 year of starvation. He's buried at the National Cemetery in Andersonville, Georgia, and he's remembered today on this plaque of our family plaque. We also we had a daughter, Georgiana. Unfortunately, we lost her to illness at age 13, and this is her site right next to the family site. We also had a son, Levi Mortimer, who served and survived the Civil War. He participated in General Sherman's March to the Sea, famous battle. And he was wounded but survived. He was wounded putting up a pontoon bridge over the Tennessee River near Chattanooga. And after he recovered from his injuries, he returned back to Novi and actually bought his own farm. It was good to have him back. Our daughter Catherine married a name that may be familiar to some Northvillians here. Harrison Yerkes, one of the Yerkes boys, and one of the founding families of Northville. So after we sold our farm and some of our kids moved back, and so we had one younger child. His name was Walter, and he moved with us to Salem, 10 miles south of here, Plymouth area. And Walter became an attorney, big shot attorney, and went south. Well, it's not easy getting south. Back then it was probably train. He went south, and he would visit us frequently. And it was so unusual for the frequency and the length of the trip that even the Northville Record documented his visits to us back in Northville, in Novi. I died at the age of 63. Pretty good life. In 1872. My darling wife, Rebecca, moved from Salem after I died back to Northville, and actually lived next door to the John Hirsch blacksmith shop. And that shop was relocated to Millrace Village. And you're going to meet Mr. Hirsch later on today in your tour. I want to thank you so much for coming out on a beautiful day, and I hope you enjoy your day, and hopefully you get to walk around the beautiful town of Northville and catch the skeletons and the Victorian neighborhoods. Thank you for coming.
Watch your step, folks. Watch your step.
It's not really even to watch your step as we go see Mr. Little. Follow me. Follow me.
Wow.
You want to congregate right up here on this hill area? Little will educate you about he and his family and the origins of Mr. Little. Step on up. It's all yours, sir.
Good afternoon. I am William J. Little. My father, Edward Little, was born in Belfast, Ireland in 1812, and as a teenager he was an apprentice for a flour mill where he lost all 4 fingers of his left hand. He married my mother, Rosetta Harkin, in 1842, and they were among the first wave of Irish immigrants to escape the famine and make their way to America in the 1840s. I was born in Canada in 1845, and after we tried several locales, we settled in Northville permanently by 1850. Nearly 2 million people, or 1/4 of the entire Irish population, immigrated to America within the 5 to 10 year span in the 1840s. By the mid-1850s, nearly 10% of the U.S. population were of those recent immigrants from Ireland. And 90% of them were Catholic, and so some Americans viewed them as a threat to the American way of life, as they feared papal influence in our political and educational system. Anti-Irish and anti-Catholic paranoia reached its peak at that time. And as an example, here is a song sheet from the era, and I will just, with the nativist and wide awake point of view, I will just sing one verse. For we are free and won't submit to intolerance and aggression from papists who from foreign lands come here to rule our nation. Uncle Sam, be wide awake, be silent, you should never, till you drive the popish snake from off our soil forever. Well, it wasn't too funny to us, but like most adolescent boys of modest means, I was a laborer until at the age of 19 I enlisted in the 30th Michigan Infantry in the toward the end of the Civil War, in the waning days of the Civil War, there was some concern that Confederate refugees in Canada might be attacking points along our border. And so our regiment was organized specifically to guard against that threat. Prior to the Civil War, the interest in the developing game of baseball was spreading westward from the East Coast. The war slowed that process, but as the soldiers returned to their hometowns, many Michigan baseball clubs organized in the years immediately following the Civil War. Northville's first baseball club organized in the fall of 1867, and their founders were listed 2 years later in my brother Sam's early editions of the Northville Record, of the Wayne County Record at that time. I'll see if I can read it without glasses. September 9th, 1869, a friendly game of baseball was played on these grounds Monday the 30th between the Lone Star of Plymouth and Eclipse of Northville, resulting in a victory for the latter club after 9 innings. The time occupied 3 hours and 45 minutes. Now, this final score was 53-36. I remember it well, as I was the left fielder and I scored 4 runs. Now, as I said, my brother Sam started the local newspaper, and for the first 6 months set the type at his home, and had to take it all the way to Detroit to have it printed. Early in 1870, however, he secured his own printing press with the help of a press. Well, I don't remember what it's called. It was a press fund initiated by the prominent citizens of Northville, and it has since continued as the Northville Record. I married Rose Howland in 1874, and we had 3 daughters and 1 son. Though I was employed as a carpenter, I also played the cornet for the town's community band, and a well-known Detroit music publisher, Cub Burdan, often came to play in Northville, and also to help teach us the art of the dance music. I will try to play Cub Burdan's quadrille. I'll use a extra heavy mute so as not to wake the dead. Obviously, I was not known for my violin playing, but I was a darn good cornet player. In fact, I overheard my Rose tell her friends and relatives that my William is the darndest cornet player I ever heard. For a number of years, I managed the opera house that my brother Sam built at Dunlap and Center Street. And in 1901, at the age of 56, consumption, or you might know it more as tuberculosis, ended my life, and I was brought over here. Been here ever since. So thank you for stopping. If anybody would like a card about William Little, you may have. I have plenty.
That we'll talk to is Mrs. Rayson. And we have
George was a shoemaker who set up a cobbler shop on Main Street. Today, Joseph's Coney Island is very near the site of his shop. He was also a trustee on the village council. And despite what our shared headstone says, that he's still alive, he's not. George passed away in August 1923 at the age of 83. He was remembered as a kindly man, a good neighbor, and an exemplary citizen. Following his passing, the village council voted to rename Yerke Street to Rayson Street, a name that it retains to this day. Sadly, I did not live to be quite as old as George. I died in the winter of 1909. Tragedy struck as I was visiting my neighbor's house, visiting her because her family was feeling poorly, when a chunk of ice fell off her roof and struck me on the base of my skull. I was rendered unconscious, and I died that evening in my home in Cabbagetown. Yes. My death was the front page story on the Northville Record. And even my personal tombstone here commemorates the tragedy. It reads, "Met death from ice falling from the roof of a neighbor's home." And that little tombstone in the middle. My story has become part of Northville's historic lore, and I hope you'll remember me and my husband George anytime that you drive down Rayson Street. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your tour.
Could you, I'm doing this just to say the first part because I missed that first.
Yes.
Who you are.
Good evening, afternoon. I am Emma Rayson, and I was born in London in 1843 and moved to Michigan July 10th,
That's good.
1865.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Ava Booby. I was born in 1852 and had a delightful childhood, full of acting, attending musicals, attending plenty of socials at the Methodist Church here in town. But above all, my family and I did a lot of traveling across the state of Michigan. As a matter of fact, I remember taking a streetcar in Mackinac City, and it cost $12.50. But it was worth every penny. I also remember traveling to Mackinac Island on a steamboat that was completely illuminated with electricity. Oh, it was absolutely spectacular. And I also do recall, on my very own, mind you, traveling to the great city of Chicago. But enough of my travels. Back here in Northville, I ran a ladies' wear shop, which was then extended to become a milliner, or I was a milliner, which is a maker of hats. I believe that's one of mine. You're in good hands. My first shop was located, I believe, on Main Street, but we did have to shut that one down and move to Center Street. With the building still stands to this day. For if you've ever been at the Hair Foundation, that was my shop. My shop was the place to be seen. It was all the rage. As a matter of fact, I was the first shop to carry ladies' night dresses, which may not seem too scandalous now, but back in the 1880s, quite salacious. Actually, on that line, I carried the first line of women's muslin undergarments. Yes. In 1883, I was voted Northville's most popular milliner, which part of that may have stemmed from the opening of the Northville Downs horse racing. And I did contribute to the horse racing purse once in a while, and I was the first woman to do so. Quite strong, quite independent, and quite popular. Another thing about my shop that was quite interesting was just the very fact that it was a staple in Northville. And besides my shop, I was elected an officer of the Eastern Organization of the Eastern Star, Order of the Eastern Star, my apologies. It's an organization of men and women that came together with the common goal of enriching the community through acts of community service and projects. I also did wish to eventually become elected the city or village clerk, but votes weren't really plentiful for women back then. But that did not stop my passion for advocating women's rights. In 1885, I submitted a petition to the State House of Representatives to better pass laws that protected women and girls alike. And like every story, there comes an end. Mine ended in 1937 when I was at the age of 85. Thank you for visiting.
Yeah, and I hope to do another drink here, so I will be back for you all. Thank you. Watch your step.
I think those are those yellow things, those round things in the ground.
I don't know.
Sure.
Howdy. Hi. How we doing?
Good.
Good. My name is John Hurst. I ended up in Northville through the way of New York. Spent some time in Wayne, Michigan, if you're familiar with that, and then ended up here in Northville. I am a buggy maker and a blacksmith. And in fact, I have my own business. It's on the corner of Main Street and Sutton. I have a blacksmith shop. I have a carpenter shop. I have several buildings. One houses a wheelwright. And I have a paint shop. And I make buggies from beginning to end, from scratch. I repair them. I'll custom paint them for you. I'll do whatever you need. But my main job is getting your buggy. You come into town, you got a broken board, you want a new paint job, you need a horseshoe, you stop by and see me and I'll get all of that for you. I only hire the best of the craftsmen. I have 2 superintendents that work for me to make sure that everything goes right. And for that reason, I can guarantee everything that goes out the door, right from the wheels to the nuts to any part of that wagon that goes wrong, you bring it back to me and I'll take care of it. A lot of people in the day would come here, spend a day in Northville. I would do their horseshoes. I would fix their buggy, I'd paint their buggy, or perhaps they wanted to order a new buggy. And if you read through the paper, they came as far away as Lansing, Ann Arbor, and we had a lot of people from Detroit. If you read the paper right now before you leave, the Northville Record just came out, I have a sale going on. I made too many buggies this year, okay? So I'm gonna start the carriages at $60 and up, and $45 and up for the buggies. So if you don't have your buggy, you come on by and see me, and I'll make sure that we can get you what you want. You want a custom buggy, I'll even do that for you. But stop and pick up your copy of the paper, and we'll see if we can't get you out of here in a brand new buggy. Do you have any questions?
Where do I buy it?
Where on the corner of, well,
Me?
yes, Main and Sutton. Actually, we have the, about 1930, the building completely collapsed. But the Millrace Village decided that we needed a blacksmith shop. So we have a recreation there of the original blacksmith shop that Mr. Hurst owned. And they claim, going through it, that we're probably within about 2 inches of the original building. So if you come by there on a Sunday when we're open, I'll be there. And we'll tell you a little bit about blacksmithing and a little bit more about the business and what we do there. Any questions?
You're gonna be there tomorrow?
I will be there tomorrow.
1 to 4?
If you want more, yes, tomorrow, 1 to 4. You can come and pick up your buggy. It won't get any cheaper. In fact, if you read the other news, I make the best buggies in the country. And it's true because it's in the paper. It says right here. Not in the U.S. where you find a better buggy. So you come to me, you're going to get the best. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So again, thank you for coming here today. You have questions, as you see, a lot of different historic families. And if you looked in here, people like in the state of Michigan, the Kellogg's, the Sheriff, and others, they were here in Northville because there wasn't too many things going on in the 1820s. They came from New York and New Jersey, came to Northville, and then eventually out in other areas of the state. So as you're in this area, you know, Northville, believe it or not, was the first in a lot of different things back in the day. We had one of the first foundries in the state. We made from Liberty Bells to Little Bells. In the old days, you couldn't just call up Amazon. At the time, you had these catalogs, Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Ward's. All the metalworks were from our foundries. And why did we have foundries? We were on the river, and all cooling and producing of the power. We had the largest furniture factory for school and church furniture factory in the world. 200 people a shift. Down at the end of Katy Street where Foundry Flask is. And we're right in the midst of reinventing ourselves with a river walk right on the river where that is. That was a huge economic boom in the mid-1800s here. We made airplanes here, the first single-wing airplane, the Stinson, which is in the Smithsonian and down at the Henry Museum in Dearborn, built in Northville, Michigan. The Cessna Piper Cub, basically from Northville, Michigan. That was a Stinson before, so until 1929, and then they outgrew themselves, so they had to go to Wayne. But Mr. Stinson was in great conversations with Mr. Ford. Ford did the tri-motor at one time. Mr. Ford would come here and get a lot of information from Mr. Stinson. Mr. Stinson just lived right around the corner here, so that was later on. But early on, a lot of things. Condensed milk, nobody knows what condensed milk is, but back in the day, condensed milk was patented in Northville, Michigan, from the Rogers family. Into this street, this is called Katy, and that's Mr. Katy donated all this land for this free cemetery. Into this street is called Rogers. The Rogers family had condensed milk, had patents on that. They used their money, and the Rogers mansion is Shiro's restaurant over in Novi. So some of you might have eaten there. It's a Japanese steakhouse, beautiful restaurant. It's on Novi Road and 9 Mile area. So that is still in there. And vanilla, one of the first millionaires in Northville was Mr. Langfield. He imported pure vanilla extract from South America and did all the flavorings for vanilla in this country at the time. So and that factory is still there down on 7 Mile and the end of Rogers Street. So this was kind of the Mecca Center. In Northville, there's 4 basic boroughs. This is the historic area here in downtown, and if you haven't gone down to the mill race, it's a great walking kind of museum. It's just Main Street and on the Griswold, thank you. I lost it for a second. Just down about 3 lights. Ford Field is on one side and the mill race historic area is on the other. That's part of the historic area. You heard from Mrs. Rayson in there, that's Cabbage Town. That is on the other side of town. That is one of the boroughs. That's where the English and the Irish were. Big cabbage field, so they called it Cabbage Town. Over at the end of this street, Rogers, from Rogers to Clement, from 7 Mile to Main Street, that was the orchard area in town. Thus, Orchard Heights. That was all orchards, you know, back up to about 1920, and then they subdivided that farm. And the house is still there, the old Eaton house from the Eaton Orchard. And on this side of town, it's by the racetrack. You can see a little action going on the racetrack. Mr. Beal had that factory that we talked about where they built all the furniture, the school and the church furniture. He didn't want those factory workers to go in and out on stagecoach and trains, so he built a whole section of town and built homes for them. It's called Beal Town for Mr. Beal. So hopefully you got a little bit of an idea. We're here because of the rivers, and then all the rivers produce the power, so we built a lot of stuff. So Northville grew during the Industrial Revolution stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, but thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
If you want, I do a weekly newsletter, a little bit of history and what's going on in Northville. Feel free to buzz me over an email if you're